Oh, what's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way. So, I don't know about you, but when I was an itty bitty Odd, one of my favorite pastimes was looking up coloring pages, just like line work. And given that I wasn't always allowed to print, I would usually just color them in like MS Paint, probably messily. It was kind of my first extension into digital art as a youngin'. Ironically, I wasn't the biggest fan of coloring in general. I'm still not. Like, I still have to look at those really pretty adult coloring books that have, like, all the cool, like, art pieces and stuff like that you can color in and remind myself, you don't like to color, you will not finish it. Even, like, when I was little, I have this very specific memory of being in, like, a pizza place as a real tiny kid, probably 4 or 5. And my parents were trying to teach me how to kind of nicely color in a coloring sheet or the kids' menu. Whatever. Coloring page, basically. But they kind of mistakenly told me to make my own lines while tracing along the black lines, trying to show that, like, oh, you make, like, a smaller area, you kind of have more of an idea of where the boundaries of the lines are. But, of course, being, like, 5, I was like, oh, cool, okay, yeah, I'll make my own lines, and just scribbled all over the paper. So that kind of describes me, it feels like now, even as an adult, to a T, because on the regular, I make my own lines. I draw my own stuff. I don't typically go in and color other people's things. I know how to color, and I know color theory and all that type of stuff, and I do find some satisfaction from it, but it's definitely not my favorite part of the process. But it got me thinking, what if I made a coloring page myself and then colored it in that way traditionally? Would I like it better that way? So I decided to make myself, and since, 'tis the season, you, whoever's watching, the general internet, some fun little coloring pages of subjects that I felt personally were cute, things that I feel like I would like to color either as a little one or, as an adult. So I started sketching out this little dragon, and at some point I decided I wanted to turn the idea of that type of page on its head. So typically, obviously, you've got the dragon as the villain, or in a very serious situation, a lot of masculine energy going on there, right? And in this case, I wanted a dragon that wanted desperately to be the princess. It just hoarded all these little gems, tiaras, comfy items, maybe it's a pet. Regardless, it's a chubby little hatchling that just craves luxury and has found it. At some point later on, I do go back and kind of mess around with the wing. It is the hardest for me, like I feel like it is for anyone, to draw a dragon wing naturally resting. Like open, you understand it kind of looks like a bat wing, but bat wings are weird and they're kind of hard to map out in my brain personally. But later on, I wound up being able to like go to sleep thinking about it, kind of map out in my head, come back the next day and kind of fix up the wing to make it a little bit more hand-like and matching the whole vision of the piece. So it definitely looks a little bit more like a bat wing toward the end. I did also, this is not true for the other ones, but this one I wound up making a different size than the rest and having to enlarge it to create the piece that I wanted in terms of, or did I have to shrink it? Either way, I wound up making it about, I think, 11 by 8.5, which was the page size that I was using for all of these. I think it's letter. I want to say it's letter. Anyway, the next one, I decided to draw a puppy. Because if there are two things that I will always draw, no matter what, there are dragons and dogs. And for this one, I decided to draw a kind of mischievous looking puppy, and they've got a hoodie because they're cool. I think I named it Cool Puppy. None of the naming titles for these pages were original. None of them. But I decided to draw it at sort of a 2-point perspective for the sake of variety, kind of give it a little bit more of a background as compared to the dragon one. And so yeah, they're kind of hanging out in this like brick or cinder block corner, either inside a building, kind of hidden in the shadows, or maybe in an alleyway. Obviously, it depends on how you look at it. This definitely feels like the type of line art that I would appreciate finding as a kid, that I'd be really excited to color, because I had a lot of dog characters, I still do, that were like quadrupedal, feral, however you want to say it, basically like the talking Disney animals, not the ones that are, Zootopia style hanging out bipedal like humans, it's just like a talking animal, maybe with clothes. And a lot of the villain characters that I had, I remember having just wearing, like, hoods. Just straight up, like, gray hoodies, not even in, like, an ominous way. I just thought that it was cool that they kind of shaded their faces. Maybe hid parts of their face, but then also, like, I didn't know how to draw hoods at all, so I think like that's still kind of true. I always wind up having to kind of look them up, but this one I thought was cute. And obviously if it were like an actual dog, it would probably have like holes in the ear holes, but I wanted something that would kind of squish down their ears, which is available in other dog hoods as well. After finally going back in my third session and fixing up the dragon's wing, I decided that it'd be good to do a third piece. Initially, I had no clue what to draw and just figured that 3 would be a good place to stop. I think I always tend to do maybe 3 pieces or 3 characters depending on the video that I'm doing, but like it just feels right to me, you know? It's like more complete that way if it's a prime number for some reason. Initially, I did try to do cat, like, and that would be like all fluffy and inspired by my cat Tulsi, who's just an absolute gigantic floofball. But I'm not great at drawing cats, and the more that I stuck on it, the more that I was like, I don't like the way that this looks, and I don't think I'm going to be able to make it into an interesting coloring page. So I stopped and wound up instead going for a fox, which I know is very close to a dog, but it looked a little bit different to me. And I figured that it would be fun having it do a little snow jump when foxes jump up into the air and dive down below to like get like a little rodent or to burrow or something like that. I thought that that would be good for like if you wanted to make like a Christmas winter themed sort of picture where you have this fox diving into snow and maybe make it all like colorful holiday themes and stuff, like a greeting card or something, right? Ironically, I wound up not making the ground area the snow when I colored it, but we'll get to that. And yeah, I made sure to fit all of these in an 11 by 8.5 inch format so that they were easier to print. And at that, moving on to printing. I got this nice cardstock to work with because I wanted to use multiple mediums, and I knew this from the beginning. Wasn't quite able to get the best quality for the print. There were some weird gaps in the black that I just wasn't able to fix regardless of what I did. And like, listen, I have a near intimate knowledge of this damn printer. It's probably just not good. It probably just doesn't like printing things right. Let's see. I want my crayons, my colored pencils, oh, maybe these, alcohol markers, just all of my supplies. All of them. Okay, but actually I want to focus on these main 3. The crayons, the alcohol markers, and the watercolor pens. Just to mix things up, I decided not to start on the dragon, but the puppy. And you'll probably notice that there's some progress that's already been going on here, and that is because I initially forgot I had to press the camera button twice. Thankfully, I realized this by sometime halfway through just beginning to color the face, but I initially thought that I recorded this whole swatching process of the crayons and showing you the colors and stuff like that, but that didn't wind up in the final results, so instead we just get this. I was initially having some problems with the camera. It's been a minute since I've actually, used it and stuff like that, and I had to deal with the whole, battery problem. So honestly, there are probably a few jumps in the process, at least for the puppy, because I wound up, not noticing that the camera had just randomly turned off for some reason or stopped recording, and it was frustrating. I did the ever-coveted scratch method to make the coloring look even, basically just scraping off any excess wax from the crayons. And initially I tried this weird, random plastic coin that I found. I think it says, a clover for luck or something like that, and it's just, a piece of trash that I found at work, honestly. But it didn't initially scratch off all the excess wax, and I was getting really tired of using my fingernail. Eventually I did start using the foot of the weird crayon sharpener that comes from the back of the box of crayons. Apparently that little googly-eyed crayon guy character that they have on the front of Crayola boxes, his name is Tip. Have you seen the lore about this weird-ass mascot? Apparently, all of the different colored crayons are the same one. He can just shape-shift like Loki, and he just decided to take the form of a crayon, of a Crayola crayon, because he thought it espoused children's creativity in particular, or something like that. This is just a random, very esoteric god of creation that has chosen to become the mascot for a crayon brand. And I learned that on the bottom of the lid for my 120 pack of crayons. It's canon in Crayola lore. I can't believe that there's Crayola lore. That tangent aside, I decided to have the mischievous puppy be doing some paw graffiti. I don't know why, but I kind of want to call him Oz. I like that name. Oz the German Shepherd puppy, and apparently Vandal. He's looking at you mischievously because he just has been leaving Blue's Clues, except vandalism. Next up, I went for my alcohol markers and the dragon print. This time you do actually get to see the color swatching process that I went through, and I did initially, when I was testing things out, I printed a few of the lines from the puppy print onto that nice cardstock paper, which was unfortunate, but I just used them to swatch. Yeah, again, just a reminder that I am using cardstock, very thick cardstock, and that alcohol markers would probably tear up printer paper, especially with all the layering that I wound up using here, which was a very satisfying process. I can see why, like, a lot of the time that, like, alcohol markers are the preferred method for maybe people that tend to use digital art more often, because it's really easy to mix and layer with, at least when you get some nice paper, which I hadn't really gotten, like, good paper for markers before, and this was a really fun experience to finally get something that, like, looked really nice. And even then, it's a little streaky, but that's probably just to do with the fact that I've been using these markers on different things and all that, and some of them are a little bit cheaper than others. I wound up going for this very warm palette with sort of pops of blue on the jewelry. At some point, I started running low on a lot of, like, the cheap guys that I think I got at Wish at some point or another. I think I explained in the video where I'm coloring, like, that fox picture, that I got them possibly for bad spending habits, but then realized that I didn't know enough about alcohol markers to really do a review on them, so instead they're fine. They're just cheap, but they're fine. And I noticed that they had the identical colors to the Prismacolor markers, which are usually too saturated to really do anything with, but I wound up using them as solid colors for things in my background, which really worked out well. I wound up going for really, like, dark royal purple pillow and kind of a turquoise floor with the background. It was a lot of jewel tones. And eventually I decided that I would call this particular little princess Ruby, since she likes gems so much. In my mind, she probably just snuck into the castle as a little dragon. The princess was, like, obsessed with her, so she just let her be pretty and spoiled. Like, I can imagine the troubles later on of, like, an adult princess having an adult dragon, and she has to figure that out, but it could evolve into a really cool story. Ooh. This, like, marauding princess and her awesome dragon, right? Finally, we move on to my watercolor pencils and the fox. I decided to pull an awfully Mariah Elizabeth move and include the whole rainbow. This piece is actually kind of reminiscent of something I made a few years ago. I had a fox doing the kind of snow dive as a header image for a lot of my social medias for a long time. I think they were even covered in paint. In some regard, the whole piece was almost a redo of that whole thing, but this time the fox is diving into a big old puddle of paint. Or rainbow water, maybe. It's all very fantastical regardless, because it's layered perfectly in the colors of the rainbow. You can tell that this isn't my usual forte. What's funny to me is that this could probably be the more realistic of the three, and I just decided to make it total fantasy. I think I'm going to call this fox Paintbrush. I think that they would totally get along with Oz in an artistic sense, but maybe not like a moral sense. Like, they're more like chaotic good, and then Oz being chaotic neutral, because Paint doesn't always understand why maybe, like, outside of their weird universe, why painting random stuff is bad. And if they knew, they'd probably be polite about it, but they just don't. The design overall is obviously a little monotone, but they're always covered in paint, so that makes sense to me, at least personally, to have kind of a muted color scheme and then have it just be covered in pops of color. But yeah, I guess I don't quite know how to explain the unending void I decided to fill in behind them. Maybe Paintbrush is some extra dimensional being that wants to fill their void with color. God, why is that existentially terrifying? Anyway, beside Ruby, these all took me multiple days. Like, I think I wound up getting all the alcohol markers colored at once, but otherwise it was just multiple days of, like, charging camera batteries, working on these whenever I had time, and then eventually when I finally got to the watercolor one, I took even longer because it was right at the end of my weekend, and I feel like it's fine to just admit that I didn't want to work on it at 11 p.m. when I got home from work, especially not having to set up the camera and all that, so I just didn't. Your girl's not setting up a camera at 11 p.m. Regardless, they did finally get done and actually, you know, somewhat on time before, you know, Christmas or all the other holidays passed and it was already 2023 or something. I'm really happy with these results. And they're not quite perfect, but it's like, it's a lot of fun experimenting with something that I find familiar. So like the digital lining process is easier for me than traditional inking. So being able to color in something with these materials and not have to worry about lining it was a big step, like in terms of just like having fun with being able to play around with the types and all that. And yeah, mixed media is totally one of my favorite methods in terms of anything. It helps kind of embrace the chaotic nature that I have for things that I want to like use everything to my disposal, but at the same time it can create different opportunities and maybe even limitations depending on the mediums and stuff like that. It's like a puzzle to figure out how to make it work cohesively, right? I'm going to be posting these blanks wherever I can with links to download them, probably in the description too. They'll probably all be PNGs with a white background. So if you want to color them digitally, that's totally cool. The one thing that you can do with most layer-based programs, even free ones like Krita, is go into the Edit tab and select Replace Brightness with Opacity. Boom. Transparent background with black lines. You put your background color and layers beneath the original, and then you have a totally colorable line art. There's also a few tricks for coloring them in MS Paint, but I'd really have to look into that because I don't think that these lines are solid black or anti-aliased, so it might be, or not anti-aliased, so it might not be completely as possible, but I'm sure if you're determined enough, you can figure out a way. I hope that you like these, and my versions of them. At that, obviously, these aren't like finalized characters by any means. They were just what I was able to make up with these line works, and I would be super grateful and super interested to see what other people do with them. If you do color them, feel free to tag me. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr most recently. All the same username, CyanDoc, spelled the same way. Nobody else took it, understandably so. So you can find me there. And I want to see it. I want to see how you colored them. Make them scary, make them cute, make them like mind-bendingly awesome, which they're all going to be anyway, because they're yours and they're cool. Of course, yeah, link where you got it, you know, maybe share this video around if you feel like it, if you liked it. And don't be stingy with your sources now, it is the holidays, come on. At that, I hope that you have a great holiday, I hope that you get good presents, and I will see y'all next year, probably? Sounds like a good goal.